A very good evening to all of you. This lecture is a continuation of what we discussed about marginalization, marginality, and marginal literature in the last lecture. Today, we will discuss a very important poem, Mountain Woman by Nirmala Putul, with regard to marginal literature. Before that, before we deep delve, before we delve deep into the discussion of the poem, let us have a small discussion more on marginality. Is marginality limited in the Indian context only on caste, class, and gender? As you can remember, those who have watched my video, that in the last lecture we discussed about the Dalit text Karukku by Bama with regard to you know the gender and caste exploitation of Dalit women. Then we discussed about the text by Mahasada Devi, you know, breast giver or Stonnodayini, when we discussed about subalternism. Now, in this particular story, Stonnodayini, we already have discussed that the very idea of milking has become a commodity. The process of milking has become a commodity. The name Josoda is quite interesting actually, very interesting, because Josoda in Hindu mythology is the foster mother of Krishna, and she is very much respected and revered in Hindu culture. And here, one woman is forced, one Brahmin woman is forced to sell her breast milk to a non-Brahmin uh, person, non-Brahmin family, for the sake of money. So here, even Mahasada Devi is playing with the very idea of motherhood. Here, the idealization of motherhood has been, you know, punctured by Devi in her story Stonnodayini. In the text, the Adivasi will not dance. We have discussed about the tribal resistance, how you know uh, Hasta Sauvendra Sekhar is creating a form of resistance through his writing, resistance against the tribal uh, community who are meant or who are seen as doubly in, seen by the mainstream society as a form of entertainment. So the Sekhar is attacking against that. Sekhar is also attacking against the sexual exploitation of tribal women who are made to sell their bodies for a piece of bread, a crumb of bread. Now, we need to broaden the scope of tribal literature. I'm sorry, please pardon me. We need to broaden the scope of marginality or marginal literature. As you can, as you have seen on my, seen in the video which I have uploaded on WhatsApp, that there I talked about the notion of disability and the ideas of, uh, AGEING, which is coming under the purview of gerontology. Now, with regard to disability, as I told you, now disability, fatness, aging, all these are also different forms of marginality. So, marginality is not just related to caste, class, and gender. We can broaden the area and include disability, gerontology, I mean aging, and fatness under this one umbrella term of marginality. In Sunil Ganguly's Kakababu series, I think those who are familiar with the novels of Sunil Ganguly, Purbo Poshim or Dui Nari Hate Torobari, two women with one hand, with sword in one hand. So these are some of the very famous novels by Sunil Ganguly. Sunil Ganguly has created one adventurous, one fictional character who is very much adventurous. But on the other hand, he is disabled. His name is, the fictional character is Kaka Babu or Raja Rai Chaudhuri. There are almost around more than 30 novels related to the adventures of Kaka Babu. Now, this particular character, Kakababu, is disabled. He is handicapped. One of his legs is damaged. Uh, in one of the novels called Bhayankar Sundar, Sunil Ganguly has described how Raja Raichaudhuri fractured his leg in order to save one person, and it never got, I mean, he never recovered from that damage, from that fracture. Now, it has been described time and again by the writer that although one of the legs of Raja Rai Chaudhuri is damaged, but he has the power of an elephant. He has the power of the famous character from Mahabharata, Bhima, in his hands. So he is very well built, muscular, and stout character. Now, time and again, when other characters try to ridicule Raja Raichodhuri for his damaged leg, he says or he replies, "You cannot fight with me because I am more powerful than you." So although his one of his legs is damaged, but his hands are more powerful than common men, common people. So this is why this is an attempt made by the writer to make a disabled character get acceptance in the mainstream society, that no, disability is not the end of your life. You can be very well accepted in the society, irrespective of the ridicule, irrespective of the sarcasm, ridicule, the comments made by other characters, other people. With regard to aging, we know very well about the character Aunt Maud from the story The Trinket Box by Doris Lessing, and Miss Havisham by a character created by Charles Dickens from his novel Great Expectations. Both the characters suffer because of their old age. Although the age of Miss Havisham is not clearly mentioned in the novel, um, as far as I remember, but it has been understood from other references that she is not more than 50 or 60. She may be in her 50s. And when she was on, during her marriage day, she was rejected by her would be husband, Abel Magovich, who was the secret benefactor of the character Peep in the novel Great Expectations. Even I would like to refer to another. beautiful, you know, stories. Cornell, Cornell series by the famous writer, Bengali writer Sayyid Mustafa Siraz. Cornell and his partner Joyanto. Now, Joyanto is a young newspaper reporter in his probably in his 30s, whereas uh, Cornell is a retired colonel with with a habit of collecting orchid and watching birds and collecting butterflies. But yes, he's more adventurous, more brave, and more courageous than his partner Joyanto. And Cornell probably is in his 60s or above 60. Now, look at the attitudinal difference. Look at the difference in terms of the two characters. Cornell is an old character, old man, but he's a more courageous, with a dauntless courage. And Giant is, although not as courageous, is not as courageous as Cornell. So, by creating the character Cornell, along with the character, uh, joined to the writer Syed Mustafa Siraz is hinting at the idea that no, aging, old age also is not the end of, it does not make anyone senile, crippled, and and does and Cornell, because of your old age, because of his old age, is not dependent on anyone. So that is also an attempt by the writer to get acceptance in the mainstream society. So this is how literature related to disability and the literature related to aging also are in a way is an attempt, make an attempt to get acceptance, make an attempt to create a discourse of getting acceptance in the mainstream society. Coming back to uh, Mountain Woman by Nirmala Putul, I'd like to refer to the fact that the title Mountain has been used by three of Nirmala Putul's poems: Mountain Child, Mountain Woman, and Mountain Man. Nirmala Putul is a very famous name in Santali literature. She was born in 1972 and she writes predominantly in Santali. And it was Ashok Singh who translated most of her works from Santali to Hindi. Now, the question comes that I'd like to particularly refer to the idea of translatability and marginality. As you can see that most of the poems by Nirmala Putul, who is to take the so-called definition of marginality, belongs to a community which is marginal. So she belongs to a marginal group, marginal community, that is a tribal community, and her poems have been translated or were translated from Santali to Hindi by one, quote unquote, since I would like to refer to a quote unquote, one upper caste man, Ashok Singh. Now, is it in that way? I mean, from this, to explain it in a better way, we can say that even here, the complexity lies in the fact that although Putul belongs to a marginal group, writes in a language which is not a mainstream language, like unlike Hindi or Bengali or English, but is dependent on someone for getting accepted in the mainstream literature. So this is actually the complexity of of the marginal literature, that sometimes the marginal groups writes in a language which is translated into a mainstream language, and that is why they are recognized and that is why they are accepted. But on the other hand, on the contrary, we have Hasda Sauvendra Shekhar, who is a tribal man, tribal writer, writing in a language which is a mainstream language, writing in English, and is speaking of her own community, of his own community, speaking of his own community, of giving, lending his voice through his writings. Well, coming back to Putul, her collection of poems, Words Resound Like Drums, were published in 2004. About Nirmala Putul, there is a quote which I would like to refer to. Nirmala Putul, I quote, counterpoises her tribal world with the developed modern world. Her poetry questions the whole notion of development and progress in modern civilization. Nirmala Putul counterpoises her tribal world with the developed modern world. Her poetry questions the whole notion of development and progress in modern civilization. Now we can discuss the poem Mountain Woman. Now, here the very title mountain, as I told you, mountain is used as a trope, TROP, trope. It stands for hardship, physical labor, physical terrain, and an essential Santal identity. As I told you in one of my lectures, in the previous lecture, there is a difference between the Dalit and the tribals. Dalits belong to the Hindu Varna system. They are the Sudras, whereas tribals, they were you know detached from the Hindu from the society, and they are having their own culture, they are having their own religion, and they are having their own society. They are mostly living in the jungle, living in the caves, living in the mountain. So that's why mountain is actually refers to the it is actually quite omnipresent. The mountain is omnipresent. It actually refers to the omnipresence of that it is there everywhere in the Santal culture. It is there. Santal identity. It is inherent in the Santal identity, Santal culture. And the poem is actually not in rhyme, you know, it is uh, not lyrical. Now, one of the probable explanation can be given regarding that is that the aim of the writer, sometimes rhyme, lyrics, all refer to romantic, all these are actually, romantic, have the romantic flavor, romantic beauty. For example, if you look at the poetry of Wordsworth, especially Lucy poems or other poems, okay, you will find the lyricism. But this poem is actually not lyrical, not it doesn't have any rhyme, probably, and therefore it is not actually a romantic poem. And the aim of the writer for not using any rhyme, or he probably is not to romanticize okay, is not to romanticize the life of the Southern women, but to present the hardcore reality of the labor of the Southern women. Not to romanticize, not to glorify. Yeah, it is to glorify, I'm sorry. Not to romanticize, but to present the hardcore reality of the Southern life, the lives of the Southern women. A bundle of dried wood on her head. She comes down the hill. Mountain woman will go straight to the bazaar and selling all her wood will quench the fire of the entire family's hunger. Now, the first stanza is quite a descriptive in nature. Uh, it describes the daily struggle, daily life of the Sautali woman, and probably actually uh, it is written from the third person narrative perspective. Actually, the poet is probably commenting on poetry is actually the poet is probably the narrator. The poet is actually commenting on the lives of the Sautali of a particular Sautali woman, and one woman stands for the entire community, the entire Sautali women community, the group of women, the community. A bundle of dried wood on her head. She comes down the hill. Now, coming down the hill, that means it automatically suggests that she had to go uphill. Uphill. She had to go uphill, and then after the uphill journey, she is coming down. Now, the uphill journey is quite arduous. Arduous, quite arduous in nature, and it refers to the physical labor. Now, we can refer to the myth of Sisyphus. In myth of Sisyphus, Sisyphus was actually punished to take one big stone to the uphill, and again is to come down, again she has to take. So it was an ever continuous process. Okay, so taking so uphill in has a significance of hardship, of arduous labor, of physical labor. Will go straight to the bazaar and selling all her wood will quench the fire of the entire family's hunger. Now look, uh, the fire. There are two interesting points. Actually, I'd like to refer to Nayan Jyoti Das. Nayan Jyoti Das has commented, I quote, Santali women played a vital part of the economy, collecting woods, selling it in the bazaar, and getting money. This is actually about the how the Santali women actually are the backbone of the economy of the Santali family, Santali culture. Selling all her wood will quench the fire of the entire family's hunger. Now, satiating the hunger, fire is actually something very precious, very pious in Hindu culture, Hindu religion. By referring to the the word fire, the poet Nirmala Putul is probably trying to debunk the very, you know, uh, uh, very notion of piousness associated with fire. She's trying to debunk it. Next stanza. Hanging on her back, a child wrapped in a sheet, mountain woman planting paddy, planting her mountain of grief for a blossoming crop of happiness. Now, this is again another example of the hardship that Even there is the poet is referring to the fact that for the Sautali women, for the tribal women, they have to carry their children to where to their workplace, and they are they have tied their uh, babies. They have tied their children at their back with a piece of. They have wrapped their children at their back with a piece of cloth or shawl, and they are doing their work. Now, this is quite. There are two, but point that we need to highlight. One is the glorification of motherhood. The poet is glorifying the motherhood of tribal women. On the other hand, uh, the poet is highlighting that how I mean the daily work for the tribal women, is not easy. I mean, if you are not having any burden, then you can. It is quite easy, or it is easy. It's not easy actually, but having an extra burden on your back make your job tougher. That's what the poet is trying to highlight. So they are carrying an extra weight, extra burden of their children, and they are enduring the extra burden, and they are doing their work. So in spite of the extra burden, extra work, extra load, they are doing the work of planting the crops, sowing the seed, planting the crops. So the poet is on one hand glorifying the motherhood, on the other hand glorifying the hardship endured by the tribal women. Planting Paddy planting her mountain of grief. Now this is quite interesting. Planting her mountain of grief. This is because uh, probably whatever they are planting, okay, they are planting paddy, but actually ultimately when the paddy will grow and when the crops will be collected from the field, then it will go to the market. And even after all these hardship and everything, they will not get the proper money, proper recognition for their hardship endured by them. So this is again a kind of Marxist interpretation we can give it to this particular line, that when a a weaver is weaving a sari. He is spending his money, spending his time, and all that, and he is selling the sari to a middleman for a cost of 20 rupees. And when the middleman is selling the sari to a popular, uh, say for example, popular Bengali, or Tamil cloth merchant, right, like uh, Tontujo, or even Bengal Cloth House, or even in Tamil Nadu Pothys, Pothys. So they are getting they are not getting and the Pothys, they are selling the sari with the cost of maybe 1,000 or 500, like that. So that money is not coming to the weaver. So this is how exploitation is actually happening. And Karl Marx actually wanted to talked about the equality of labor, equality, only to stop this kind of exploitation. Now here, planting her mountain of grief, because not only because of her physical labor, but also because of her frustration, her anger, that she is enduring the pain, she is doing the hard labor, but she will not get the proper money, proper recognition, and her poverty will continue to exist. There will be no end to her poverty. For a blossoming crop of happiness. So labor is transformed into happiness, into capital. Happiness, it brings happiness to the mainstream people, to the people who belongs to the mainstream society, not to the tribal girl or not to the tribal family. Breaking apart these stones of mountain, she is breaking mountainous rituals,